short presentation, I'm a French GP. I studied in Lille for the beginning of my medical studies. And I work where you see the little star, red star on the base of Paris in a town called Malakoff, where I'm a GP working with 7 other GPs, 3 nurses in something that would look like a GP clinic of the NHS, of English GP clinic, which is not usual for France. And I've been a part of the No Fakemed Collective since 2018. I was among the first ones who wrote the op-ed we're going to talk about, and who is now the president of the collective since last year. Okay, next, please. As this is a presentation, I gave my interest. I have no ties with the pharmaceutical industries. I'm a GP. I'm elected on the equivalent to your GMC, to the British Medical Board in the outskirts of Paris. And I work also for sometimes for a teachings company and doing research with an institute called Jean-François Rey, which works with health centers across the country. If you scan the QR code, you can have my ties, which are none. So everything is okay. Next, please. So I'll start with a brief history of homeopathy in France and how we became so fond of those little sugar pills. So I will not tell you all about homeopathy. If you have questions, maybe we can talk about how it's made, how it was discovered, and so on. But just for how it became so popular in France is that in 1835, Samuel Hahnemann, who had legal issues in Germany, moved to France, and so at this time there was not much to do in the pharmaceutical area, and so what he proposed, who was the sugar pills, the dilution, so on, but also the healthcare guidelines that we know are good today, like walking more, airing the rooms, and sometimes doing nothing just so the disease could run its course, was successful, and so he was quite popular in France. So it was quite popular. We had many schools and many collectives who defended homeopathy until today. And in 1965, we had a health ministry who decided to reimburse fully homeopathy in France. So it became reimbursed as paracetamol is reimbursed until 2021. In 2018, what was not yet the Fakemed Collective published an op-ed, which you can find on our website, who asked our government and the faculties and also the social security to stop funding alternatives and medicines and things that were not based on on science. And it was, I will really dig down on the details afterwards, but there were some slap suits. There were also a lot of ads and advertisement and political pressures from the big sugar lobby, which is the main producers of homeopathy in France. I think about the Boiron laboratories or Velleda and so on. And also all the doctors who were defenders of homeopathy, who were well installed in France, who had schools, who had all centers, and who had also a lot of money. In 2018, there were the HAS audition. HAS is our supreme authority in healthcare, who decides what is funded and what is not funded, what is not reimbursed by the Social Security. And so, as of today, since 2021, homeopathy is no longer reimbursed in France. Thank you. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, the op-ed. In 2017, in the late in November, we were a few doctors on Twitter making fun of homeopathy, and we were just discussing about it on the public threads, and a journalist who was on leave at the time, Soline Roy, which worked at the Figaro Santé, decided to give us room in the Figaro Santé to publish an op-ed about that. And to describe the situation, we were just people who just exchange online. We almost never saw each other in real life. And there was at the time a really small but quite active community on Twitter of medical doctors, many GPs who did a lot about for information on healthcare, sometimes even interacting with patients, but in order to just give general information on healthcare. And there was also a lot of fun. Always a lot of humor, a lot of tongue-in-cheek and small and images, which we now call memes, were the base of what was really a small community of maybe a few thousand people who talked a lot, maybe sometimes saw each other in Congress, like at some events, and we felt that as a group we could do something. So we started with 10 people making first drafts, and in the end 124 healthcare professionals decided to sign in their names. The op-ed was published in March of 2018. We thought it was a fire and forget op-ed, something that we could do and maybe forget afterwards. We were quite proud of having the ability to publish it in the Figaro Santé. We had no idea of what would follow. And so I will take you to the next slide. Slap suits. Okay. Homeopathy is quite popular in France. I think like maybe 70 or 75 of the French people at one point in their life just had to take some sugary pills. And so there's a lot of doctors who prescribe homeopathy and a lot of doctors who live by homeopathy. And there are some of them are members or created their own unions. And so two unions, one in the south of France and one in the east of France, decided that if we did not, as people who signed the op-ed, if we did not apologize publicly or retracted our op-ed, they would sue one people for every day until we retracted the op-ed. So I think they had never learned about the Streisand effect. And so the press actually quite liked the idea and began to talk about it. The health ministry, which was Agnès Buzyn at the time, was interviewed on the subject, even if she was just coming on the radio for something else. And so they just started a big machine that they really couldn't stop. And so the slap suit really gave a visibility to what was just a small op-ed in the journal. And it began snowballing. There were first journals like the Figaro Santé, the Monde, Libération, who begins to make some small articles. Then the radio took it, and then TV sometimes talked about it. And so for a few months, even though it was at the time Nicolas Sarkozy was our former president was being scrutinized and had legal issues, people were still talking about homeopathy because I think it was just a part of how French thought they should be cured. And so we were just a small bunch of Twitter medical students. I was still a student at the time. I had not sustained my thesis, and so we were like maybe a group of 100 to a few thousand people online who just started responding to the people on the internet. And Twitter is this magical social network where even though you have a small account, even though you just talk to some friends for years, one day some journalist decides that he can talk to you and you can talk to him. And so you have about the same audience as someone who has been, installed in the working as a lobby for years. So it was quite exhilarating. and we used the tools we had, which was humor most of the time, and the scientific methods. And so we began digging deep into homeopathy, working on the sides, learning about how it was really created, so we could answer the journalists when they asked questions. And so we had actually quite a lot of fun discovering how homeopathy was made, created. And so when we were invited on TV or in the radio, it was actually quite funny just to put the homeopath doctors in front of their contradictions and asking them if they really thought that X-rays diluted into sugar that would really have an effect on someone's health. The suits, the legal issues are still running. So the groups, the unions of homeopathic doctors really attacks in front of the GMC of what we call Ordre des Médecins, which is your medical board, about 100 of people who had signed the op-ed. And so we also discovered how our medical board on the national scale works, and how homeopaths and people who do alternative medicines had infiltrated this institution. And so we're still waiting for the end of the legal issues. Afterwards, as we had legal issues, we had to form ourselves as a collective. I think, could you put the next slide? And so we had to face, as a small collective who was based maybe with 100 of medical doctors, we created the No Fakemed Collective, and facing us was all the doctors who prescribed and who loved homeopathy, and also the producers of homeopathy who went full scale and who decided to do a campaign which was called Mon Homeo Mon Choix, which means my homeopathy, my choice. And they actually recruited people like Xavier Bertrand, which was a highly known and highly popular political figure who had almost a shot at being president in France in the recent elections. The small green cards you see were in every pharmacy in France. The picture with the people in the white t-shirts, this is a manifestation in the heart of Paris. And so it was actually quite funny to see a small group of doctors facing this lobby, which with so much cash and so much power. So we had to rise up, and we also had to wise up, as Hamilton would say. And so we created the No Fakemed Collective in order to organize ourselves and create a website first, and also some other tools. Can you go to the next slide, please? The first president, which is Dr. Jérémy Descoux, is a cardiologist in the south of France. And so under his lead, we decided to participate in the healthcare, in the HS auditions. And with the help of anyone who was willing to help and who had the scientific background, we answered the auditions of the HS. And so we did a scientific study on homeopathy with all the bibliography and argumentation that were needed. After, it was a hard time, because we discovered that it was not just a scientific debate, but for some people really it touched how they felt, and it was really a deep personal thing for them. So it was really their identity, not just their way to prescribe. And so I know that Jérémy was actually threatened a few times. He received some unpleasant packages. Afterwards, also some letters of threats. For my part, fully, I didn't get any threats, but we will see that COVID was even worse afterwards. So in 2019, the HJS, the healthcare institution, decided to finish this audition and decided that homeopathy would be defunded progressively. So it was progressively, it's now not reimbursed at all. And so they did it on a progressive scale. But today, we still have deputies and people in France who still ask for so that it should be funded again, and we should pay for for sugar with our social security. For the numbers per year in 2016, it was accounted that just the pills cost the social security 200 million euros, not counting the formations that were reimbursed by our social security for doctors who were paid to do lifelong learning about homeopathy, which to my point is quite surprising. And also all the time it took for in faculties who taught homeopathy, and all the rest of the prescription and the consultations of the doctors who only did homeopathy, which were a waste. And so one of our main agreements as we went on the radios and the press and the TVs was, okay, we don't have enough nurses, we don't have enough doctors, we don't have our nurses and our healthcare providers. So that's really 200 millions we could use elsewhere. And it worked. So that's a win. And afterwards, Cyril Vidal took the presidency of the No Fakemed Collective, and we thought we could have a rest and focus on the role we were set, which was really talking about disinformation in science and how we could really work with the health ministry and the faculties to just exist, to train like students, to train our students to have a critical thinking. And you can go to the next slide. We started creating the Fakedex, which is a small one-page or two-page slides that any doctor could have access to, which give information and bibliographic, scientific information about fake meds, or what we call fake meds, which are alternative and complementary medicines. So here you have aromatherapy, hypnotherapy, mesotherapy, or a form of acupuncture, which is hydrotomie percutanée, which is injecting saline solution under the skin. And so we try to do bibliography and research on what it's based on, how it's taught, how it's what could be its principles. And sometimes we don't really have an answer. For meditation, for hypnosis, it's not black or white, it's more a gray area. But for example, aromatherapy, we can talk about the side effects and so on. And so we were really focusing on having a tool who could give patients and healthcare providers useful information when they were faced with people who were really into fake meds. And then our next slide happened. Yes, I think you all lived through it and we're still in it. It's COVID and the wave of disinformation we had to face, and both on the internet and in everyday's life. And so it just, even though the COVID pandemic was really a hard time for everyone in our association, because we had a lot of work and we were under a lot of pressure, and we had really, it was not easy every day to go to work as a GP during this period. As a collective, we saw the reactions and the heated debates, to say the least, that went down, and how people were really violent about COVID, about hydroxychloroquine, and how in France people really were really aggressive and who really were spreading a lot of disinformation. And we saw that as a collective, we actually became not just our collective, which the people who formed the collective, but a brand, and we're not a brand in the mercantile form, but just a way to say, okay, I'm a no fake med healthcare provider, and I just want to give my patients something based on science. The people who spread this information use this term now as no fake merde, which you would call no fake shit. Merde is shit in French. No fake shit. Science and healthcare providers, but they never really attack us. But as on the contrary, when people rise up, and when people begin to go not as a collective but as themselves on the air, on the radio, on TV, they were systematically attacked. And we found out during the pandemic that being a collective, having the possibility to really send maybe the president, maybe the treasurer, maybe our secretary general, or maybe someone we just have, relations with, and we say, okay, just go for us and talk about this subject, more about us, was a way of protecting ourselves also, and maybe a way that could, even if we don't impersonate the answer to some questions, we protect ourselves in these critical moments, and we did not suffer as much as maybe people like, for example, Karine Lacombe, which was quite vocal at the beginning of the pandemic, and then was just harassed by hordes of people on the internet, and it was a difficult time for her. As a collective, hopefully we didn't have these issues. And so now we have, as a collective, maybe we can go to the next slide. And the next one, maybe. We try to up our game, because we are now something that is recognized by both the media and some of our administrative and political forces. We were received, and we had a face-to-face meeting with Olivier Véran at the end of the COVID, at the end of last year, which was quite fun. And we also are currently trying to work with Mivilude and our faculties to promote critical thinking, to fight disinformation. And so after the first years of the collective, which were really a bunch of people making fun of homeopathy online, we are now trying to evolve and wise up and try to walk on 2 feet, which is trying to provide useful and clear and scientifically based information to healthcare providers and patients. This is the role of our website. This is the role of the Fakedex I've shown you. It's free of charge. You can use it. It's like you can use the slides. You can use everything you want. And the other thing we try to do is also not leave the room to people who spread disinformation, both on the air, when we worked with the media, with the journalists. We try to give them solid and useful information. And also on the legal side, when people just go too far, the slap suits we've been through have given us an expertise on really our legal system in France, concerning the suits that can be held in ethical courts or the board courts. And so we decided to sometimes act, and this is what we've done with a French doctor, which is called Martine Vonner, who is a psychiatrist in the east of France, who was also a deputy, and who was with Perron and with other people spreading loads and loads of misinformation online. And so the collective decided to act and to sue her, and we should have the answer of this legal suit at the end of the month. I will keep you in touch. So thank you for giving me time to present our small history. And now I think we could just talk about it and exchange on the matter. I'm sorry if my English is not perfect.
Pierre, it was fascinating, seriously, the fact that you're so brave, and I have a lot of questions for you, so please do raise hands, anyone who has questions. But I hope you're not are you being like charged for these lawsuits? Because if this was happening in the US and if somebody was coming after you, financially, it's probably unsustainable. That's one question. And how much of a headache does this give you, or was it a headache at all?
About zero headache today. I'm not. It's not a lawsuit that would end up with me being charged on the financial level. It's more the ethical side of and the professional side of lawsuits. And at the worst, I know I would get sentenced to not be elected in the medical board for 3 years. And well, actually, and it would be also almost a way to say, okay, so your system is just rotten because you're defending people who defend homeopathy, and you sentence me for not being polite and not being as polite as you wish I would be with them. I'm just stating facts, and I'm just trying to inform people about what scam homeopathy is. So if you want to sue me, fine. If you want to sentence me to not being elected to your medical board, fine, I'll resign. But I will carry this blame as a decoration along with many others. Yeah. And it would just be I'll just be fine. And financially, the collective created itself, so we could also take one lawyer who would know all the suits, and so who would accept to charge us for the amount our insurances would cover. So I would not have money really taken from my pocket. I've been reimbursed by my insurance, so it's not a lot of pressure. Excellent. On this side.
So has all this work been done pro bono? Do you have anyone supporting you, or have you received people who said, okay, we're proud of what you're doing, how can we support you? Did you get any financial support? You don't need to disclose who it was from, it's just a fact.
Oh, everything is, we don't have any financial sponsors. All our money is from our people who sign up with the collective. We don't need a lot of money. I mean, everything, we just have a website and also people who agree to move. So today we don't have the need to have sponsors and so on, and also a way for us to be independent. Mm-hmm. Our strength is more our humor and our network. And we have really some brilliant people, François being among them, in our network, who can really help us understand how some of the things work, for example, on the European Union scale, or and also to begin to work with the administrative and the state side of the lobbyists. We have to be a lobby, so we have to understand how it works, but we don't want it to be. We're just trying to do it on the with our humor and our spare time.
All right, I have a fundamental question where whether you answer, Francois, David, or Ian, or I get, because it's not, it's more of a system question. What do you think is a dream or an objective in terms of homeopathy? It doesn't matter which healthcare system we take. Is the objective to completely separate it from mainstream medicine and say, okay, this is success, and we have this, and okay, there are some groups who want to practice it, but this is unregulated, this is not reimbursed, this is shamanistic kind of practices, and we stay away from it? Or the goal should be to eliminate it completely, or it's something else? So what is a realistic objective? What is a dream, I guess? And any
I can try to answer this question. I think it's a very important question. Personally, ideally, I think we should get rid of these scam medicines, this quackery. As you know, Lisa, I met Pierre on Friends just by chance. I was on Twitter, and I started to see. They contacted me to translate, in fact, the open letter published in the Figaro. Then I started to, because I was so angry, I sent a letter to Prescrire, complaining about their ambiguity towards homeopathy and so on. So it started from that, and when Pierre and colleagues received let's say the legal suits before the GMC, I started to write some kind of assessment of the evidence, and from now on it snowballed, and I was involved in the process. What I discovered and what was utterly shocking, and it is still very shocking, Lisa, is it unraveled some very sad stories. People were using homeopathy to allegedly treat autism in children, and they were GPs prescribing homeopathy to treat autism in children. People prescribing homeopathy to treat cancer. And clearly there was in this story, it was not a simple, let's say, funny story of prescribing sugar and making fun of homeopathy. Behind that, there was some nasty, some very nasty and very sad stories, and people dying from these practices. So personally, I think we should really have a very strong stance against this scam. They should be banned. The ambiguity is, at the moment, as you know, Lisa, homeopathy has a legal status of a medicine in Europe. So in the EU, homeopathy are regulated by regulatory agencies, and they receive formal and valid market authorizations in Europe. So it maintains this kind of ambiguity that homeopathy is a state-of-the-art validated medical practice. And I think that we should really get these messages across, and we should get rid of these practices. Realistically, can we achieve that? No, I'm not sure, because you've got a lot of them are now virtually protected or officialized by the legislation, like osteopathy. Osteopaths in France have
you've not heard it.
a formal recognition for, by the government. So realistically, it will be extremely difficult to get rid of these practices, Lisa. But I think we should try to make sure that they don't get recognized. They don't get any kind of protective statuses from the government, from the legislation, and when there are some excesses in the practice, they should be condemned. But I mean condemned, legally condemned. Physicians or any quacks who practice these cats should be subject to legal proceedings.
Any other comments? Thank you, Francois. Any other comments on this question? What should we do?
You will never get rid of the high street homeopaths, and it would be counterproductive to do so, probably. Maybe they give a little consolation to some people, but you can, and it's largely happened now after 200 years of effort, get rid of it from universities and from the National Health Service. I mean, what the aim is to stop the taxpayer paying for it. If people want to pay for it, you can never stop that.
Yes,
Okay.
I think on
Go
this
ahead.
subject, sorry, wellness, we should separate wellness from healthcare. And so the collective has fought against homeopathy and considers the fact that it's not longer paid by taxpayer as a win. And it's a big win. It's not something we thought we would achieve. but it's a more global fight against disinformation. Tragic stories that François told about and that people really should know about. He talked about people who treated cancer with homeopathy, but also people treating autism with Reiki, or the fact that people treat diabetes with naturopathic remedies, or for my part, on a personal scale, I started to fight and to refuse the role of homeopathy in France when I saw a young girl who was 6, who had epilepsy, who was having seizures all day long. And when I asked her mother why she wasn't taking her treatments, she answered me that, oh no, her neurologist is an homeopath and she gives them pills. Okay, so you stop the medical part, and just having your daughter seizing all the time and having huge health problem because of that was really a shock to me. And so that's when I really started to take things seriously. And so on the legal side and on the achievable side of the fight, our credible end goal would be to have an educated population who knows what is healthcare and what is wellness, who has information, who has been informed, and so who can choose to take pills, to go to an osteopath, take needles for acupuncture, and who will have the possibility to say, okay, stop, I did it for wellness, I did for this, I will not treat my cancer with that. And that is something we can achieve by taking it out of anything that is healthcare, including faculties, our clinics, and our healthcare system.
Yes, the other thing that is the only thing you can do to stop high street homeopaths is to stop them making false claims. In the UK, we have the Advertising Standards Authority, but it's completely toothless. It can't do much. It just says, stop saying that. So they tweak a word or two and just carry on and ignore it. I think if they and trading standards, which is the sort of legal arm of it, were a bit stronger, that would help a bit. But, you know, while Dr. Oz and Alex Jones make mega millions out of it, you're not going to stop it, are you?
No.
And the worst, David, is I think you make an extremely valid point, but the point is, at least in France, the French Ministry Agency, because of the status of homeopathic remedies, grants indications, unsubstantiated indications to homeopathic remedies, and it opens the door to advertising. What I always find extremely shocking when you go to France, and you might have noticed that yourself, David, if you go anywhere in France, when you see the retail pharmacies, their selling point, the first selling point is we are selling homeopathy. I don't know whether any studies were conducted to assess or to quantify the prevalence of these alternative therapies in different countries, but I really find it extremely shocking that you've got such a prevalence of these practices in France. It seems to me that it's completely subjective. Huh? It seems to me that it's much less prevalent. The population is much better educated on this side of the channel.
Well, in Germany too, it's absolutely right. I once went to a meeting of single molecule physicists because my previous existence was in the single ion channel analysis. And I was this was in Germany. I was astonished to discover that most of them were quite trusting of homeopathy. These were physicists. They just didn't know what it was, I don't think.
But I think one step, I think if we were to stop the institutionalization of these practices, so if the French Medicines Agency was stopped granting these nonsense indications if osteopaths were not recognized by the government. If I think it would be if homeopathy was taken out the European legislation of medicines, this would be a major step forward. At least we could have a way to tell people, okay, these are unsubstantiated practices. At the moment, they are using this ambiguity of being getting some partial recognitions from governmental bodies to make some claims or to capitalize on their reputation.
I have a question about doctors, because a dream that we'll have an educated society at some point who will know about wellness and who will know about evidence and medicine, it will always be limited to extremely small proportion of people, and majority will be looking for miracles. And that's where homeopathy is winning big, because people want the easy solution, and it kind of pushes itself this way. So my question about doctors, correct me if I'm wrong, if we take mainstream board certified physicians, clinicians in any country, not homeopaths, so to speak, just doctors, as I understand, some of them like homeopathy and some of them actually prescribe it at the same time, being qualified doctors and prescribing other medications. Is there a solution there? Can we separate one from the other to make sure that doctors practicing proper medicine say, look, if you want to drink lemon juice, it's not with me, like, go somewhere else and try it. So in what are the steps? Because I think, David, you started this saying, okay, we need to take this out from the universities. Should there be a legislation framework? Should each country kind of take this forward, saying, look, let's separate the two? And from your perspective, maybe Pierre, you would know this, what proportion of doctors in France are kind of pro homeopathy and would prescribe it, and what proportion is definitely adhering to medicine and say, you want homeopathy, go elsewhere?
It's difficult to have numbers, because the only numbers you have are the numbers that Boiron gave us during the debates, which were that 70% of doctors had at one time prescribed homeopathy. But the problem is that as homeopathy is in every counter, in every pharmacy, and in everybody's life, if you were a kid growing up in the 80s, you obviously had to have homeopathy. If you had a bump or a scratch or a flu, you would take for the flu you would take oscillococcinum, or for a bump you would take arnica, and it was just the way most French mothers would cure the kids at first. So there's really a social pressure to prescribe. But what we saw as we worked on the subject is that real homeopaths, people who really believe in homeopathy, who just don't prescribe it because they think the patient wants it or because the patient asks for it, are quite rare and quite old, and most of the time struggle to have people who want to take on the burden, who want to follow it. And there are still young homeopaths who are being trained, but the fact that it's no longer funded and it's funded makes it less of a calling that it was at the time. On a political scale, homeopathy was also maybe developed in the 1970s and 1980s in France, because ironically, we had too much doctors. And so in order to have patients, doctors had to have a little plus, something that would attract the patient. And so many doctors actually went on having claims like, okay, I will treat you with natural remedies. I will treat you with homeopathy. And if homeopathy kept this biological and ethical and natural side, which it doesn't have. It's also it was also only marketing and only advertising, and so nowadays the people who really are fond of homeopathy are rarer and rarer, I think. But we have other issues like osteopathy and naturopathy, which are growing fast and which are also giving us problems in healthcare. And that's what actually we tried to do in our latest op-ed. We did it again. But this time about saying that we shouldn't give scams to kids. So the op-ed was about osteopathy, essential oils, which are sometimes used during pregnancy and for young kids and shouldn't. And something that is quite popular in France, which are amber necklaces for teeth. And I have, I forgot the last one, but I think it was. And we also forgot to talk about homeopathy in the op-ed, but really it's, we did it again and we had less success in the media, but it was also because we started from higher. So many people actually understood what we say, and the landscape has quite changed because now it's not as people are okay with science and know the cost of fake meds in our society. Osteopathy, also tongue. I don't know how to say. François, do you know how we?
Oh, no. The removal of the part of the tongue, in fact, to suckling, breastfeeding.
Sorry, it's no, if it doesn't know it. Posterior tongue ties. I don't know if you have a problem in the UK with posterior tongue tie sections, but in France we have it became a trend, and every little infant had his tongue ties cut because everyone was saying, oh, it would help with the breastfeeding, and so it was a problem.
Thank you, Pierre. Ian, your perspective, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I've been listening. I mean, I think there are separable problems with homeopathy, and we had a former Consilium talk not long ago about alternative medicines. I mean, ideally, we'd like everybody to use evidence-based medicine, but in terms of homeopathy, on the one hand, you hate to see a lot of people giving useless but perhaps not harmful medications and making a profit from it. And that's one side. But the other side is where people are persuaded to take these medications, not in addition to, but instead of medications that can really help their disease. I mean, you mentioned, for example, Pierre, a woman not treating her child for seizures when there's effective medication available and using some medication that does nothing. And of course, we see this in cancer, and that came up actually in the last time we discussed this in Consilium, that what is even more tragic is where you see people using useless medications for diseases that could be potentially cured. And that does happen quite widely. I would say that in my own experience, I see more often people taking homeopathic medication in addition to standard treatment. And most of them are not harmful. For example, in Toronto, we have a huge Chinese population, and people take Chinese traditional medications, which are probably not very different. But we do also see people who refuse to take effective treatments. They had women with breast cancer who've refused to take adjuvant hormone therapy and have taken some homeopathic medication instead, and that is particularly harmful and particularly worrying. And that's something we need to stop. Interestingly, anecdotally, Steve Jobs, who died of a tumor of the pancreas, actually refused and he didn't have he had a different type of pancreatic tumor that was quite treatable and refused regular treatment, and apparently had homeopathic treatment and of course died. So it's not only the uneducated who go along these pathways.
François?
Just to comment on just to elaborate on what Jan said, which I think is extremely valid, talking about the evidence-based medicine. I'm still astonished that NICE has published some guidelines. And I was looking at on Monday the guideline on palliative care in cancer, and this guideline from NICE explicitly mentions the use of complementary therapies in palliative care in cancer. So I don't know how these recommendations crept in the guideline, but it gives you an idea of how institutional bodies like NICE can be infiltrated by these scam medicines, and how a very reputable body like NICE can publish some recommendations based on no evidence whatsoever. So I think there is still some progresses to be made in terms of evidence-based medicines and recommendations concerning these therapies.
Actually, I'm not surprised, Francois, because I remember it was a field trip from NICE for our team in London. I don't know if you were with us or not. We went to the Health Select Committee in the Parliament, and NICE was called to the floor. I don't remember what the case was about. I don't think it wasn't verdicts, it was before. And we just went to see the process. And what surprised me so much is one of the parliamentarians was completely getting off the subject. It was nothing to do with that particular question, and pushing NICE to focus on homeopathy and
Right.
complete.
Probably David Tredinnick, was it?
I'm not gonna.
I actually met David Tredinnick. He was a very polite man, completely mad.
It was not one person, and I was actually quite shocked how strong was this push, and not that it influenced NICE in any way, but at the same time, I don't think there is a very clear guidance within the organization about it. And it's a separate thing, which I think needs to be looked into. It's not just NICE. I'm sure there are quite other HTA bodies that probably raise the question.
And also
NICE has never recommended homeopathy, though.
Correct.
And also but it recommends acupuncture in some guidelines. So, but to make another point, we are also in a very difficult situation. If you compare, in fact, the issues associated with homeopathic remedies between Europe and the US, for example. In the US, the issues associated with homeopathies are very, very nasty. Patients use products which contain some counterfeit medicines or even heavy metals or these kind of things, because homeopathic remedies are absolutely unregulated by the FDA in the US. And the FDA has to regularly pull out of the market or recall some counterfeit homeopathic remedies. So it raises the issue that all these therapies must be regulated in order to guarantee some kind of quality of their materials. But on the other hand, we should not give them any kind of scientific credentials associated with these regulations. But it's a fascinating subject.
Indeed. Well, Pierre, thank you so much for sharing this story. Thank you for being so brave and making a difference, at least in France. So I think many other countries have to learn from you and from your team. and there's a lot of work to do. So I think we do deserve a better healthcare service which guides population, because as you say, resolving this completely, it might not be possible, but at least we need professional organizations really taking a stand and regulating this as much as we can. So thank you so much for joining. So
thank you very much,
everyone.